Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PR Leaders Keynote presentation. We'll get started in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over some information. These are just a quick reminder of the benefits that come with your annual subscription to publicrelationsleaders.com. You get live monthly web meetings, which I assume you know about because you're attending one. However, if you are ever unable to attend live, we do record and upload these for viewing whenever is convenient for you. Get to know the other members, log in to see profiles, and we're glad to make any introductions. If you're wrestling with key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members. It's very easy to post questions, and our community of fellow professionals is always happy to help. After each meeting, we generate summaries with key takeaways and learning nuggets so you can easily reference them and put them into action. There are many other benefits, but I wanted to highlight just a few. If at any time you have a question, click anywhere on the slide and post it under comments. I'll open the forum for live questions at the end of the discussion. Now, let's meet Nneka Chiazor. Nneka is the Regional Vice President of Public and Government Affairs at Cox Communications for Virginia and North Carolina, and is going to be presenting for us on Black is the New Green, leveraging PR to reach diverse audiences. And now I'll turn it over to Nneka.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelly. And good afternoon, everyone. Happy Black History Month. I'm really glad that I get to be here. And honestly, I love this format. I have not used this format before, but thank you for alleviating the video pressure. I don't feel any Zoom fatigue, so I'm really looking forward to this chat. Black is the new green. Some of you might be wondering, oh my gosh, like, what is she talking about? Well, I plan to unpack that today. But part of this conversation is the conversation that I've been having across the Commonwealth and with a lot of folks that are really interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, and business. And what it's about really is it gets to the question of how do we build a better future for the next generation? And I like to start off with, this image here of this young kid, this young boy who has a dollar bill as a bow tie. He's turned a dollar bill into a bow tie, and he has, if you can tell, he has this strainer on his head, and it's tied to a machine that's making all kinds of money. And really what that is intended to show there is just the ingenuity that lies within all of us, and how in each and every single one of us, when we start out in this world and we make our way out in our world, we all start out with dreams and aspirations. And my hope today is that I can unpack for you one of my aspirations, and that is to leave the world a little bit better than I found it, and to certainly create a way for the next generation to have a brighter future than I've had. So with that, I'll turn on to the next slide. You know a little bit about me. I'm Nneka Chiazor. I'm with Cox Communications. And I just wanted to tell the story of, how did I get to where I am, and how did Cox get to where it is today? So Cox is a family-owned business that was started in 1898. That's over 120 years ago, by a gentleman named James M. Cox, and he's the handsome guy to the far right. James M. Cox started out as an entrepreneur, and he purchased the Dayton Daily newspaper. And the Dayton Daily newspaper at that time was, I guess, akin to what Facebook is today. He started, though, from humble beginnings. He was a teacher, and he really valued information and saw the value in ensuring that people of all walks of life had access to information. And so with that, he started, again, Dayton Daily News. He went on to become the governor of Ohio 3 terms in a row. He ran for president back in 1920. Franklin D. Roosevelt was his running mate. He lost, and the rest is history. But through the years, I also wanted to unpack for you all, some of the other entities, establishments, organizations that have certainly had a profound impact in my life, but have also had a profound impact in the media PR space. So at the top, it's Madam C.J. Walker. And Madam C.J. Walker, for those of you who may not be aware, was the first African-American female millionaire, one in the United States, but she was also the first African-American female to create a beauty product for women of color. And how did she become so famous? Well, she became very famous by branding herself on her beauty products, which was uncustomary at the time. Because you see, at that time, when she was coming into her own, the images a lot of people were accustomed to seeing certainly did not look like her, the images in the public space. I'll fast forward a bit. As Madam C.J. Walker was fading away, Cox was now entering into the media space and evolved into Cox Media Group. In the same era, Motown as well was now gaining its own. And I'm sure everyone is very familiar with Motown. It's a really well-known musical brand. And it too leveraged PR, public relations, in the music industry, particularly with Black people, to make a name for itself and to make commerce for itself. Continuing up top is Mr. Johnson. And he is someone who certainly had a profound impact on Black lives. He's the founder of Ebony Magazine, which went on to be Jet Magazine. He's also the founder of Fashion Fair Cosmetics. Fashion Fair Cosmetics was one of the first cosmetic lines that offered foundation. So if you think about makeup, it offered foundation for women of color. And Fashion Fair Cosmetics, particularly Mr. Johnson, was the first person to give my mother, who is based in Nigeria, her break in business. He actually offered her an exclusive license to carry Fashion Fair products for West Africa, and that changed the trajectory, not just of her life, but for so many lives, including mine, in Nigeria. And I can keep going. There's Black Entertainment Television, which a lot of you are aware of. There's OWN Oprah Magazine. There on the bottom corner, there is Cox Automotive evolved, Mannheim, Auto Trader. Mannheim and Auto Trader, folks are not aware, those two brands actually do belong to Cox. They're Cox brands. There's Cox Communications, there's Cox Media, Cox Business. That's where we are today. And at the top today, there's also an entity called Fearless Fund, which is not owned by Cox, but it is a brand that today is fearlessly focused on ensuring that there are more women of color, people of color that have access to capital to drive their business. So why am I sharing this with you all? Well, I figured I'd share this with you all because I thought it would be good for you, for everyone to get a sense of, here are some of the major entities that have certainly played a significant role in my life, but that have played a big role in the lives of people of color and that have played a big role in business. And one of the ways that they played a big role was by leveraging public relations. And I'll get to the point of why PR is so important as we move towards Black is the New Green. So as we get to the next slide, one aspect that folks might not necessarily be aware of is the following. Today, African Americans do make up the fastest growing segment as it pertains to mobile consumption. So when we look at smartphone ownership, think about your mobile phones and also tablets. African American ownership grew from 44% in 2011 to 98% in 2020. That's huge. That's faster than the rest of the total population of the United States. This is a statistical fact. So there are several organizations, including CTIA, the Wireless Association, that tracks closely who is using mobile products and how. And all the studies that we've seen has shown that Black communities and Black consumers in general tend to over-index on mobile products than any other household. Another interesting fun fact, African American buying power right now stands at $1.4 trillion. That's a 48% increase since 2010, and that stat was based on 2020 figures. That's huge, right? 48% of African American households shopped online last year, 2020, and that number is expected to increase by 1% this year. And that figure is 11% more than the average household. And so when I talk about Black is the New Green, I'm encouraging companies, institutions of commerce, nonprofit organizations as well, to start to lean into the fact that you have communities that are out there that are important, not just because of the color of their skin, but they're also important from a commercial perspective. And so when I bring this into conversations from a DEI perspective, we talk about it now from the stance of what can we do from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective to tap into this wealth that will continue to grow. There is a book, actually, that is titled Black is the New Green. It's a fascinating read. And for any of you who are out there that are in the PR world that might have targets regarding increasing product reach or increasing brand exposure with the Black demographic, I strongly suggest you pick up the book. Let's move on to the next slide because there's some other interesting things I'd love to share here and then open it up for questions because I'm a talker. Another interesting thing that we look at in my industry, which is the cable industry, we of course look at consumption of media and entertainment. So you heard me talk a little bit a minute ago about mobile usage. Well, when Black consumers are using smartphones, right, adopting smartphones faster than the rest of the population, what are they using those smartphones for? Well, what we're finding is African American consumers are the largest ethnic group when it comes to playing game consoles, consuming smartphone media, streaming audio, as well as watching live television. And some have come up with this hashtag, this is not mine, Black Viewers Matter. So to the extent you're hearing in PR circles or media circles on Twitter, hashtag Black Viewers Matter, this is what the hashtag means. It means we recognize now that across the United States, this trend of increasing smartphone usage, increasing consumption by African Americans is here and it's here to stay. And so the question then becomes, well, with this trend, how do we as corporations or as entities tap into it? And in what way do we do it that's inclusive and that fosters belonging versus commoditization? So let's move on to the next slide. So what ways can we do this? Well, this is an opportunity area. When we looked at, as an industry, what are some areas that we can really lean on viewership? Because remember, I started off by sharing, I'm in the cable industry, we have live TV consumption, we have smart media consumption, but just spending a bit of time on live TV consumption, we looked at the fact that today, Black women in particular only represent 2.2% share of screen relative to the rest of the population. So some of you might be wondering, what do you mean when you say share of screen? I'll explain it to you. Nielsen has done several studies, and what they've done is they've looked at television time, television viewing time, screen by screen. For a lot of popular shows, the top 10 shows that are broadcast live in the United States. And for those shows, they found, with the exception, of course, of like Empire, which is a predominantly Black show, they have found that, again, this demographic only represents 2% share of screen. Black males, that figure goes up. They represent 15% share of screen, and the numbers are higher for everyone else. And so when we think about this particular figure, and we think about the adoption rates of mobile and the viewership rates, we're saying to ourselves, and I'm certainly saying, well, wow, this certainly looks like an opportunity, one, that can foster more inclusion, and an opportunity, too, for those who are in the programming space, those who are in the media space, and particularly those in the PR space, to be able to capture, right, this particular audience. Let's go on to the next slide. So why does this matter? And I want to spend a little bit of time on the why. Earlier today, I had the pleasure of speaking with the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce in Virginia. I am the Vice Chair of Diversity for the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce. The Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce is the largest chamber of commerce in the United States. And on my panel discussion this afternoon is the president and CEO of an organization called LISC. And LISC, in a nutshell, is focused on uplifting communities through loan programs, small business programs, lending programs. And in speaking with the president and CEO of LISC, he has a project called 10X. And Project 10X is focused on driving $10 million in capital investment to lenders, builders, community developers over the next 10 years, straight undiluted capital. And we talked about why. Why are you doing this now? The reason why you hear about projects like Project 10X or why I talk about Black is the New Green is because, as a scientific fact, the Black population in the United States is expected to rise significantly in the next 4 decades. So that figure, by 2060, the Black population is expected to be at 17.9% of the United States population. Some of you might be asking, for those of you who might not be familiar with diversity, equity, and inclusion terms, as I am familiar, you might be asking yourself, well, what do you mean when you say the Black population? How is that different from the African American population? Permit me to explain it to you. So when we talk about African American, the term African American is used to refer to those who are of African descent in the United States. So some might identify as those who are descendant of slaves or those who were enslaved in the United States, who have that history, or those who may have been born in the United States and are American citizens. When we refer to Black population, in that context, we are using that to include those who identify as Black that have migrated from other countries. So think about, for example, folks like myself who migrated to the United States from Canada, or folks who may have migrated that identify as Black from South America. That is the distinguishing factor. The Black immigrant population currently accounts for 1 in every 11 African Americans. But that number is expected to shift also by 2060 to 1 in 6. And so I'm sharing this with this audience so that you understand as well that in the coming years, in the future, not only will we see more diversity in the U.S. population from a Black demographic perspective, African American perspective, we will also start to see diversity within that diverse demographic. And so it is important now for us as communicators, as PR professionals, to begin to understand those nuances because they will have some impact on the products, services, as well as communications with those specific audiences. So with that, let's talk about the next slide. What does that diversity look like? What do we mean when we talk about the future and U.S. population demographic shifts? Well, here's the thing. Today, right, we know what the situation is. Today in the United States, we are operating under a white majority. But multicultural consumers today in the U.S. make up 38% of the U.S. population. But that number is expected to change by 2044. And that's not a long time. That's like in the very near future. So when we think about these two shifts combined, an increase in the Black population in the United States, an increase in multicultural consumption in the United States, those two factors together are causing some of us, specifically in the communications industry, and those of us that are focused on media, to have an intentional look at our products, our services, our programs, how we attract talent, how we engage talent, and how we build a future for the next generation, keeping this important metric in mind. When we say multicultural, please, 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 please know, multicultural includes everyone. It also includes white. And so these are some of the components that we're thinking about as we think about Black is the New Green in our context. What does this mean, though, if you're a business operator? So if we move on to the next slide, we're looking at a lot of studies. I've been looking at a lot of studies, myself, my team, the Hampton Roads Chamber, the Virginia Beach Economic Development Authority, the Public Affairs Council. I can rattle off a number of folks who are the best and the brightest that have been taking an intentional look at what do we do to really leverage this future that we're going to have in the U.S. Well, one of the first things that we're thinking about right now is the ecosystem, the business ecosystem. Do we have the right structures in place today to enable or to foster Black is the New Green? What can we do to provide the building blocks that Black business owners need to thrive? And I'll speak to you in a second about how PR comes into this, but PR does play a big role because right now we're looking at $290 billion in business equity is at play for Black-owned businesses. And just so I give you a bit of a highlight in terms of what this McKinsey study offers, one of the things that it showed is, which I'm pretty sure maybe all of you may be familiar with already anecdotally, but this is what the study highlighted, that the social and economic institutions that we all know and have come to trust, that same trust is not necessarily there between Black entrepreneurs and those institutions. So that's one. And some of us in PR are seeing this play out when it comes to vaccine adoption. I wish there was a like button so I would see in the chat if folks have heard any misgivings from either their friends of color, people who are Black or African American about taking the vaccine. That mistrust for institutions, established institutions, has those ramifications. And as PR professionals, we are called upon to help address these issues. And so again, I think it's incumbent on us to be more aware and more understanding of this diversity dimension so that we can help solve some of these challenges from a communications perspective. A silver lining, I would say, regarding everything that I just discussed and COVID-19 has been this. I think, if anything, because of the advent of COVID-19 and because of the racially charged violence in 2020, we're now at a point where I can have an open and respectful conversation about this topic with communicators without feeling fearful about, oh my gosh, is this going to affect my career negatively? Am I going to receive any type of backlash by talking about this? I, for one, take real good comfort in that. So let's move on to what else is happening with Black is the New Green. Well, following the racially charged 2020 I mentioned a few minutes ago, what did organizations do? A number of organizations, including mine, partnered with their PR departments to do what? Make statements. And if you're in our industry, in my industry, the statements were really loud. At Cox, we made a statement that we were going to support social justice organizations to the tune of roughly about $2 million. $1 million went to 3 organizations, Urban League, Equal Justice Initiative, and UNCF. And we also sponsored the Ad Council's Love Has No Labels. And if you haven't seen that ad, please check it out. It's a pretty powerful ad, but I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. But the Ad Council ad is a perfect example, again, of how leveraging PR can help foster Black is the New Green. I cannot tell you how many folks within Cox, our employees, particularly our Black African American employees that have responded so positively and favorably to Cox, learning that Cox was supportive of the ad, right? I can't tell you how many small businesses, minority-owned businesses, were endeared knowing that, whoa, Cox supported this ad? That's great. I didn't know Cox would support something like that. So I'm sharing this with you in terms of these are the new ways now that we are leveraging PR to diverse audiences. It's the right thing to do, and it's also the right thing for our business. Other things that have been done in this space since the Racially Charged 2020. Comcast, of course, dropped $100 million, announcing that it was going to give it to a number of organizations. Recently this year, they announced they stood up a collaborative called RISE, which is focused squarely, I believe, on minority-owned businesses, as well as standing up an NBCU Journalism Academy that's focused on minorities who want to become journalists. And the list goes on and on. SoftBank made available $100 million strictly for minority-led companies that wish to start a business. And so, again, right, if you think about the capital in its collective, it's $300 million plus, and this number is growing. The number I'm showing you here is from 2020. $300 million going towards corporate social responsibility programs, social justice organizations, minority-owned businesses, all aimed towards supporting Black African-American causes, Black African-American communities, and really making clear that Black is the new green. How? By partnering with PR. But for public relations departments and organizations, a lot of folks would not be aware that this capital is on the table. What is the government doing regarding Black is the new green? So let's get to that. Let's get to the Biden-Harris plan. The Biden-Harris plan, if we go to the next slide, calls for $150 billion in new capital and opportunities, $50 billion in equity investment, and 1.5 million planned homes. And in speaking with folks that are working specifically with Vice President Harris on her racial equity initiative, one of the aspects that they're looking at is how do we promote what the administration is doing? So that's another PR move. And how do we ensure that there are more Black African Americans that are involved in the solution set of promoting these programs? Again, just an example of what the administration is doing and plans to continue to do in this regard. I'm going to bring it home to Cox, and I'll use these next couple of minutes to bring it home to Cox and then open it up for questions. I love to brag on my company. I would not be in the role I'm in if I don't do this. I'm really proud to say I work for Cox. We are one of the top companies for diversity. We've been ranked publicly in that regard. And for me, my pride comes in knowing that it's not a talking point for us, it's in our DNA. Our philosophy is actions speak louder than words. And so for us at Cox, we tend to focus more on what are we doing more so than what are we saying. And I will say this to you as PR leaders and communicators, that I personally believe that 2021 is going to be the year where a lot of companies and organizations are going to start to be held to some type of accountability, some type of reckoning regarding promises that were made last year. I had a great conversation with a VP of strategy of this organization named Turbine Labs. Turbine Labs has this fantastic daily briefing on DEI. And if you don't get it, I encourage you to get it. It's their diversity, equity, and inclusion briefing. It comes out every day. And we had a conversation recently about this is what they're doing. They are tracking all the companies that made public statements whose PR shops made public statements about we're going to do this, that, and the other, and trying to figure out, well, what has been done since then. 2021 is the year we'll see more of that, and I'm proud that I know I work for a company that is going to meet the test. If we move to the next slide, why am I saying we're going to meet the test? Well, there are 4 things I would say Cox does, and we do really well. And these are our actions that I'm enrolling everyone in. Engage. As PR professionals, the time has come for us to engage the space. If we really, really, really want to walk the talk, and if we really want to, as a matter of business, as a matter of impact, amplify Black is the new green, we've got to engage. Not just supporting National Urban League and other civic organizations, but look at your supply chain. Look at your PR agencies. Are they diverse enough? Are you diversifying those that you lean on to help you conduct your business? These are some of the areas that we've tried to make a difference at Cox. We have a $700 million target supply chain program. We have scholarships that we award to diverse vendors. And I can tell you this, we know that it's not enough. We plan to do more. I encourage you all, especially as PR leaders, to do the same. If we're really going to make a dent in fostering inclusion in America, knowing the future that's coming, we have to skate to where the puck is going, and we have to do that by starting early, engaging the space. The second action that we take at Cox that I encourage everyone to consider is empower. We empower our communities. We empower our people. We have a principle at Cox called Empowered People. And Empowered People is essentially about championing inclusion, unleashing potential, and shaping the future. We do that all day, every day, including as a public affairs matter. And so, again, my call to everyone here is, how can you, where you sit today, empower those that are on your teams, empower those you do business with? Examples, creating mentorship and job shadowing opportunities. Pick somebody maybe that doesn't look like you to gain insights. Reach out to maybe one of your African American or Black colleagues respectfully and find out what their perspectives are. I'm sure a number of you have heard of several companies, especially in the fashion industry, that have had mishaps regarding ad campaigns that didn't go too well, but could have gone a little bit better had they just sought, the insight of one of their colleagues that was a person of color, that was either Black or African American. So I encourage you to empower those that you work with, that work for you, that consult with you, that you do business with. Empower them to be transparent with you in a respectful way, because that also helps to amplify our voice as PR professionals. And then last but not least, one of the things we do at Cox as part of empowering is increasing our diverse hire and promotions. We have set a target for ourselves to increase our executive presence with people of color by 50% over the next 5 years, which is huge. And this includes public relations. Again, if you remember, I said not too long ago, only 2% of folks, of Black women are on the screen. What can we do more to empower more Black women to be on screen, or empower more people with disabilities to be on screen? Something to think about. Moving on to the next area that I think really sits well with this group is educate, driving public awareness on inclusion and diversity. And I believe that this action sits squarely on our shoulders as public relations, right? How do we raise awareness with the public in a way that fosters interest, in a way that does not shame, right? Because I know that at times, I've seen some shame out there, in a way that does not guilt, but really gets people excited and energized about, hey, I really want to do this. How do we do that? How do we leverage our corporate power to drive more positive images of people of color in the media? You know, we often say in DEI, you cannot be what you cannot see. How do we get more people of color, more Black people seen in media? And then last but not least, how do we eradicate bias? And I use the term eradicate boldly as somebody who lived in Lagos, Nigeria, and dealt with bouts of malaria. And I remember there was a time when there was talk about eradicating malaria, and people were like, that'll never happen. But guess what? Bill Gates is now on that mission. If we can talk, if we as the human race can eradicate smallpox, we've eradicated polio. If we start to look at bias as a disease, how do we as PR professionals who are so good at winning hearts and minds help to win hearts and minds in the inclusion and diversity space? It's up to us to get this done. And so with that, I would say at the end of the day, part of our actions at Cox that I'm enrolling everyone in on is evaluate, measuring success. Success is going to look like different things to different people. Success for a nonprofit organization is going to look very different than success for a for-profit, right? Success for a startup is going to look very different than success for a 122-year-old company like ours. So figuring out what success means for you and creating a dialogue of success is also going to be imperative for us, not just as PR professionals, but for us as we embark on Black is the New Green. And I can tell you that having engaged several leaders, Black and African American leaders, Urban League, NAACP, UNCF, and on and on and on, success for them, for us, will look like how true did organizations stay to the commitments that they made post the George Floyd tragedy. So I encourage all of you as PR professionals to keep this in mind, keep yourself and your organizations accountable as we make our way towards Black is the New Green in the years to come. And so with that, you know, the next slide just shows some resources that Cox has available. Of course, I'm always here. And with that, I'll stop because I'm a talker and see if there are any comments, questions. I'll open it up to the floor.
All right, everyone. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Nneka. Anybody who's got questions, you can click anywhere on the slide and present them there. Or if you'd like to ask them live, you can hit 5-star and I will unmute you so you can ask them live. And I did have a couple come in while you were speaking, and you might have already hit on this, but I want to ask you again just in case there's something you want to elaborate on or anything like that. So for smaller companies who have definitely been, you know, trying to figure out the way forward, what would you recommend as a first step? Somebody, if they haven't really focused or if they just haven't focused on the diversity and, you know, because they don't have the money that unfortunately Cox does to do all these amazing things, for a smaller company, what is their first step?
Okay. You know what? That is a great question. And I get that question all the time. I would say for a smaller company, listen. Actively listen and share. Don't just listen and not say anything. And this is what I mean by listen. So let's say, for example, you're a startup, okay? Or let's say you're a small business, you have 6 employees, and maybe your employees, let's say all your employees are all white. Start a conversation. Colleagues, let's get together. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like for us? Because I should have mentioned this at the onset. Diversity, we define diversity as where 2 or more people are gathered. That's another thing I forgot to mention. Diversity is more than just the color of skin, gender, etc. It's also diversity of thought. So start the conversation with your colleagues and listen to what they have to say. Those are some small things that you can do. And you might find like you will have some colleagues that say, well, I really would be interested in having more racial diversity. I just don't know how to go about doing it. Or you might be in a small business where you do have racial diversity. You might have maybe just one Black person on your team. And you might reach out to them and they might tell you, you know what, I don't want to be that one person that speaks for the entire race. And that's fine. But I would say start the conversation, listen, and engage the space. Other small things that can be done if you're a small business. Look at something as simple as your website and the images on your website. Because I'm assuming I'm speaking to a PR crowd, right? We are in the business, again, of hearts and minds, of words, sounds, and images. Look at the images on your website. Do the images on your website reflect the America of today or tomorrow? Think about that. And if they don't, is that something that you can change simply? I use Canva. I look for stock photos that are diverse. And I'll be honest with all of you. My definition of diversity includes white people. I will continue to say it, right? At Cox, we talk about white males as diversity partners. We make that very clear. So there are small things that one can do to say, not just to signal diversity, but at least to even start that intentionality of, I want to be an inclusive partner. Does that help?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great answer. And it kind of brings up another one, is if the PR person is the one who's taken the onus to make this change, how do they teach up? How do they get the buy-in from people who might be above them in the chain of command?
That's another good one. There are so many studies that I can give you, but one way, as communicators, it's important, I think, to know if your leadership is fear-based or growth-based, right? Some people respond to fear, some people respond to growth. If your leadership is fear-based, it does not hurt at times to send them examples of, this is what happened when so-and-so, our competitor, or someone else in the industry made this mistake. We do not want to run into that situation. This is why we're doing X. If you find yourself in a growth-oriented organization, that might be easier. You can say, well, this particular model has worked in this case, and we believe it's going to work for us as well, right? So these are some examples, and I'm trying to think of one that I can actually bring to life. So as an example, and I say this, I share this actually with some students that I engage at Norfolk State University. When you think about, let's say, for example, you're in the beauty industry. I want everyone to really think about the beauty industry. When people think beauty, the image that comes to people's minds most times is white female, long hair, blue eyes, and that's great. But look at what the beauty industry has done over time. Think about the ads that are coming from Dove or the ads that are coming from Birchbox. Notice now that they're multicultural. They're showing different dimensions of beauty. But that takes time. How did these companies make that case? Well, they shared the data with their leadership to say, this is the increasing demographics in this area. And if we want to appeal to this audience, adding these images or incorporating these profiles would be helpful. And I'm yet to meet a CXO that says no to that. Honestly, I'm yet to find one. I'm yet to find one that says, "No, take that image out." It's becoming harder. It's becoming harder.
Hopefully there aren't any of those people out there. So, all right.
Well, there are those people out there. I don't want to sugarcoat it.
Of course.
Bias is inset. But again, I think data, when we get to data-driven decisions, it helps,
Can't go wrong.
right?
Can't go wrong if you got the numbers to
right?
back you up.
When you got those numbers and you can show, hey, this particular video that that had diverse groups of people had so many likes versus this one, the data.
I love that. All right, everybody, last chance. If you would like to ask a question live, please hit 5-star on your phone, or you can press anywhere on the slide and enter it. All right, it looks like we have answered all the questions. Nneka, do you have any last parting comments?
Last parting comments, and I say this at every conversation that I give. Please view this as a conversation. We, all of us, every single one of us, right? We were not born into this condition, right? We grew up in this condition. So it's a conversation, and it's a loving conversation that has to be had with grace and forgiveness. Give yourself the permission to have a conversation, to get to know somebody who is different from you. That's all it is. And get yourself an opportunity to have the conversation, especially if you're on the private sector side, about what does business also look like? Because at the end of the day, I think at some point, right, people definitely want to be valued. People also want to be employed, and they also want business. And these are the two things right now that I can tell you are hurting folks in female communities and Black and brown communities as well, is getting jobs and getting back to work. So please find an opportunity to have these conversations.
Thank you so much, Nneka. This has been a fantastic presentation. I am super excited to watch it again. And I would like to thank everyone else for taking the time to be with us today. I hope you enjoyed our speaker as much as I did. Don't forget to check out the website in a few days if you'd like to listen to this or any of our previous discussions. And we will talk to you all next month. Have a good one.